In the center of Europe sits a country that is easy to underestimate. The Czech Republic, also widely called Czechia, has no coastline, no vast territory, and no global superpower image. Yet its location has placed it at the crossroads of some of Europe's biggest historical forces. It lies between Germany, Austria, Poland, and Slovakia, surrounded by lands that have repeatedly shaped the continent's wars, empires, trade routes, and political ideas. Its capital, Prague, is one of Europe's great historic cities, but the country is much more than a beautiful skyline of bridges, castles, and old streets. To understand the Czech Republic, you have to see it as a place where geography, industry, empire, nationalism, dictatorship, and democracy all collided. Its story is not one of constant expansion. It is a story of survival, adaptation, and repeated reinvention. Geographically, the Czech Republic is a compact Central European country covering just under 79,000 square kilometers. Its landscape is often described as hilly rather than extreme. Mountain ranges and uplands frame historic regions, while basins and river valleys helped support towns, farming, transport, and later industry. The country's climate mixes temperate continental and oceanic influences, meaning it sits between Western and Eastern European weather patterns. This geography matters because it helped make the Czech lands both protected and exposed. They were not isolated like an island, but they were not an open plain either. Routes through the region connected German-speaking Europe, the Danube world, Poland, and the wider Slavic East. That position made the Czech lands commercially useful, culturally mixed, and politically valuable to larger powers. The historical core of the country is Bohemia, a name that still carries enormous cultural weight. In the late 9th century, the Duchy of Bohemia emerged under the influence of Great Moravia, an early Slavic state that helped shape the political and religious foundations of the region. Over time, Bohemia became more than a local duchy. In 1002, it was formally recognized as an imperial estate within the Holy Roman Empire, linking it to the complex political structure that dominated much of Central Europe for centuries. By 1198, Bohemia had become a kingdom. This mattered because it gave the Czech lands a recognized status inside the imperial order. Bohemia was not merely a province on the edge of someone else's realm. It developed its own institutions, nobility, prestige, and political identity. Prague became one of the great symbols of that identity. As the largest city and historic capital, it developed into a political, cultural, and religious center. Its importance came not only from beauty or architecture, but from its role as a seat of power and learning. In the medieval and early modern periods, Prague connected local Czech traditions with German, Latin, Catholic, and later Protestant influences. The Czech lands were never culturally simple. They sat within a wider Central European world where languages, elites, churches, and trade networks overlapped. This complexity helped produce a rich urban culture, but it also made the region vulnerable to conflict whenever religion or empire became unstable. Prague's later role in revolts, reform movements, and democratic awakening was rooted in this long history as a city where ideas and power met. A decisive shift came after the Battle of Mohacs in 1526. Following that turning point, the lands of the Bohemian crown were gradually integrated into the Habsburg monarchy. The Habsburgs ruled a vast dynastic empire, and the Czech lands became part of a much larger political machine. This did not erase Bohemia's identity, but it changed the balance of power. Local nobles, religious groups, and urban communities had to negotiate their place under a dynasty whose priorities stretched across Central Europe and beyond. The tension between local autonomy and imperial control became one of the defining themes of Czech history. The Czech lands were valuable because they were prosperous, strategically located, and increasingly important economically. For the Habsburgs, controlling them meant strengthening the heart of their empire. Religious conflict soon turned that tension into catastrophe. The Protestant Bohemian Revolt helped trigger the 30 Years' War, one of the most destructive conflicts in European history. After the Battle of White Mountain, the Habsburgs consolidated their rule over Bohemia. The defeat had deep consequences. It weakened Protestant political power, reinforced Catholic Habsburg authority, and reshaped the region's elite structure. For many Czechs, White Mountain became more than a military defeat. It became a symbol of lost autonomy and forced submission to imperial power. The long-term reality was complicated, but the memory mattered. Later national movements would look back on this period as evidence that Czech political and cultural life had been suppressed. History became not just a record of events, but a source of national meaning. When the Holy Roman Empire dissolved in 1806, the Czech crown lands remained within the Austrian Empire. But the 19th century brought a different kind of transformation: industrialization. The Czech lands became one of the most industrially developed parts of the Habsburg world. Factories, railways, mines, engineering, glassmaking, textiles, and urban growth changed society. Industrialization created wealth and a modern working class, but it also intensified national awareness. Czech speakers increasingly sought recognition for their language, culture, and political rights within an empire dominated by German-speaking elites. This period helped turn cultural revival into political ambition. The modern Czech nation was not born only from medieval memory. It was also built in industrial towns, newspapers, schools, associations, and debates over who should control the future. World War I broke the old imperial order. When Austria-Hungary collapsed in 1918, most of the Czech lands became part of the new First Czechoslovak Republic. This state joined Czechs and Slovaks in a shared political project, built on the hope that self-determination could replace dynastic empire. Interwar Czechoslovakia stood out because it remained a parliamentary democracy throughout the period when many neighboring countries drifted toward authoritarianism. It had strong industry, civic institutions, and a Western-oriented political culture. But it also faced serious challenges, including ethnic tensions, border vulnerabilities, and pressure from a rapidly radicalizing Europe. Its democratic survival was impressive, but geography again made it exposed. A small democracy in Central Europe could not easily resist the ambitions of larger powers around it. The Munich Agreement of 1938 marked one of the darkest turning points in the country's modern history. Under pressure from Nazi Germany, and without Czechoslovakia being able to defend its position effectively through Allied support, Germany took control of key border areas and then systematically dominated the Czech lands. The occupation destroyed the independence of the interwar republic and placed Czech society under Nazi rule. This was not simply a diplomatic crisis. It was a collapse of the security system that Czechoslovakia had depended on. The trauma of Munich left a lasting lesson: international guarantees can fail when powerful states decide to sacrifice smaller ones. After World War II, Czechoslovakia was restored, but the restored state entered a very different Europe, divided by Soviet and Western influence. In 1948, Czechoslovakia became an Eastern Bloc communist state after a coup d'état. This shifted the country from restored democracy into a Soviet-aligned political system. The communist period brought centralized control, restrictions on political freedom, state planning, censorship, and pressure on civil society. Yet the Czech lands retained their industrial base and educated population, which made the gap between social potential and political control especially visible. In 1968, reformers attempted to liberalize the government and economy during the Prague Spring. The idea was to create a more humane form of socialism, with greater openness and freedom. But the experiment was crushed by a Soviet-led invasion. The message was blunt: in the Eastern Bloc, reform could go only as far as Moscow allowed. 2 decades later, communist rule ended not through a bloody civil war, but through the Velvet Revolution of November 1989. The name captures the remarkable character of the transition: firm, dramatic, and historic, yet largely peaceful. Mass demonstrations, civic pressure, and the weakening of Soviet control across Eastern Europe made change possible. For Czechs and Slovaks, 1989 restored the possibility of democratic politics after decades of one-party rule. But the next great transformation came quickly. On December 31, 1992, Czechoslovakia peacefully dissolved into two independent states, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. This so-called velvet divorce was unusual in a region where state breakups often produced violence. It showed a political culture capable of negotiation, compromise, and institutional continuity even during major national change. Today, the Czech Republic is a unitary parliamentary republic and a developed, high-income country with a social market economy. It combines democratic institutions with a European welfare model, including universal health care and free tuition university education. It ranks highly on human development measures and belongs to major international organizations, including the United Nations, NATO, the European Union, the OECD, the OSCE, the Council of Europe, and the Visegrad Group. Its modern identity reflects centuries of layered history, Bohemian statehood, Habsburg rule, industrial strength, democratic ambition, occupation, communism, peaceful revolution, and European integration. The Czech Republic's story is not just about a country between bigger neighbors. It is about how a small Central European nation repeatedly survived powerful systems and kept rebuilding its place in Europe. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.